Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Happy Thursday and welcome to The Ron Show. Thank you for allowing me the grace of taking a couple of days over the last 2 days to go down to Clark Hill Lake, enjoy a little downtime, some sunrises, some sunsets, a little kayaking. My right shoulder's bothering me. Actually, it's been bothering me before then, but anyway, we'll let that slide. I still managed to get the kayaking in. Here's what else I was doing. As is the case, it seems anymore when you take a little time off, unless you are able to leave your laptop or mobile devices behind, you're still going to keep up with what's going on in the world, right? It's just we're at the razor's edge right now of calamity. Politically speaking, you've got climate issues. It's 1,000 degrees outside, so you're always wanting to know what the forecast is and what weather's coming your way, predictably or unpredictably as that may be. And I'm a residential realtor, so I've got folks who are looking to buy and or sell, some folks who are looking to lease, some people who are looking to lease out. It's a nonstop thing. And I sort of played the Murphy's Law thing. Business had been sort of quiet for me the week and a half or 2 weeks beforehand, and I thought, I know how to break this. Let me go take a quick little mini vacay, and I guarantee you my phone will go from quiet to blowing up off the hook. And sure enough, yesterday I spent about half of my day working on vacation. It's okay. It ain't ditch digging. I'm not complaining. An article, however, caught my attention that I wound up chiming in on. I wound up chiming in on an article from WSB Television, and it's financial guru Clark Howard. Clark weighing in on some of the low and or no down payment programs that exist now for home buyers in an era where interest rates are still high, more than 7% in some cases, in many cases actually above 7.5%. Home prices still growing, still skyrocketing because we have a housing crunch where home builders from 2001 to 2008, those are two recessions, to 2020, pandemic, recession, either stopped, slowed down, many went out of business. The number of homes built started lagging behind, falling off course, to the point that we are now millions of homes. We are 330 some million people in the United States. We're about, I guesstimates are 4 to 7 million homes below where we need to be. That's roughly, if you figure there's 3 to 4 folks in a home, you're looking at like 7 to 10% of the population without a substantial place to live that they could be owning on their own. So zero or low down payment programs afford an opportunity for people to get into a home, whereas they may not have the sort of savings set aside to put down 3 to 3.5%, depending on the kind of mortgage loan they'll get, whether it's an FHA or a conventional mortgage. And if they're a 1099 employee, meaning they don't get paid on the 1st and 15th, benefits, no W-2, taxes withdrawn, et cetera, and so on. If you're a 1099 employee, it's even tougher, and you have to put even more down. Trust me, I know this because I am a 1099 employee as a residential real estate agent. You have to have a healthy 10 to 20% down and so it's really hard to bridge that gap. So some lending institutions are offering low to no down payment programs. I know this because I talk to several folks and try and pair them with some of these lenders who do this, and I know these programs in and out. Clark Howard, the WSB Television financial guru, spent a little time earlier this week crapping on the idea of these low, no down payment programs, hearkening back to the housing crash of 2007, 2008. And it's a misapplication, honestly. I'll explain. First, I'm going to read to you the article that appeared in WSB Television. I don't know why there wasn't a video accompaniment to this, because I think there was on their broadcast that night. Anyway, here is what the WSB TV article shared, and then I'll give you my response. Actually, I'm going to back up a little bit because I want to share for you headlines. Headlines are what most Americans read in social media and in news clippings. They read the social media post that accompanies the article, and then they read the headline, and then they may read the first paragraph. It doesn't go much further than that on the average, on the whole. The social media post from 2 days ago, whoever works in social media, WSB Television, wrote this verbiage. Howard says taking out a loan with no money down puts yourself in a hard place. There's no equivocation there. No may, no can, might. Howard says taking out a loan with no money down puts yourself in a hard place. Never mind the puts yourself. I don't. My English teacher, 7th grade English teacher, is in my head talking to me. That can't be right. The headline for the article: Home ownership shortcuts? ? Clark Howard explains why zero down mortgages can hurt in the end. Okay, now we have a little equivocation. But still, the social media jargon and then the headline. I mean, there's very little upside, you would think, from these sort of programs just from reading the social media jargon and then the headline accompanying it for the article, which read, "What's old is new again." And in the case of mortgage down payments, Channel 2 consumer advisor Clark Howard says that is not a good thing. No equivocation there, is it? And also, we're tying back to the housing crash of 2008. And I'm telling you, this is a misapplication of those two eras. Howard explains why paying zero down upfront could hurt you in the end. Okay? Of the ideas from the real estate bust 15 years ago, see, here he goes again, misapplication. The zero down payment mortgage has come back to life. Howard says taking out a loan with no money down puts yourself in a hard place. Because that means you're upside down on that home loan from the minute you buy it, and life is not perfect. Things can happen, he said. You may need to sell your home, but if you have no equity in it and you go to sell, you're going to have to come to the closing table when you sell with potentially tens of thousands of dollars, he added. Howard says the shortcut to home ownership, to buy a home with no money coming out of your pocket up front, creates trouble. What advice does he give to homeowners instead? Take the time to save up a down payment and put some money on the table when you buy. That's his advice, which just isn't a reality for everyone in that situation. My response to that is easily summarized. And by the way, if you follow my real estate social media, you'd see this. That would be @Ron on the Real. @Ron on the Real. Like zero down payment programs, Clark Howard's advice isn't for everyone. If you're struggling to cobble together a 3 to 3.5% to put down for a home, along with the money you'll need for an inspection and closing costs, and you qualify for a zero down mortgage, knowing you're going to live where you are for 5+ years, this is me talking, I said do it. Anyone buying a home takes the risk of unforeseen financial issues. Continuing to pay rent as opposed to starting the path towards growing your own versus your landlord's equity, aka personal wealth, isn't a financial risk. It's a certainty. That certainty being you're enriching a landlord, property management company, or private equity firm versus you and your offspring. Yeah, I'm a realtor, and yeah, I have lender allies offering zero down and no PMI programs as well, by the way. And I'm happy to help anyone interested. But I say that because I'd rather see Metro Atlanta homes owned by people and not hedge funds. I know who's going to shop locally, and it ain't private equity groups. I also shared this to my own personal social media, and I got some pushback from some people who, again, kind of wanted to harken back to the 2008 housing crash. Nonetheless, you know who agrees with me? Clark Howard from 2023. Here's Clark Howard on his podcast talking about low, no down payment programs and who this would actually work for.
So this is where my advice comes on these kind of loans. If the monthly payment that you would have in the home that you're looking and buying at a time of unfavorable conditions to be a first-time home buyer,
which it is,
if the payment is roughly equivalent to what you've been paying in rent, and you are interested in staying in that area for a minimum of 7 years.
I said 5. He says, or 5 plus. He said 7.
In that home for a minimum of 7 years. Don't wish 7 years, but that your job situation, your personal situation, your career is in a position where it's very likely that the odds are strong you can be in that house 7 years or longer, then going with a low down payment loan is okay. Now, why was I so this, and this? Okay. A lot of times someone will take on a home purchase with a significantly higher monthly payment than what you've been used to paying in rent. You didn't have a lot of money for down payment, so you're in there just barely into that home. Really no equity existing in that home. And you're trapped in that higher payment. That's why the first step in having a potential green light on taking out an ultra low down payment mortgage is that the payment is in the general vicinity of your current rent. Second thing is do a true assessment of where your life is personally and professionally. How stable are you in both areas before you would commit to buying a home where, because of the very low down payment, you're not in a position to easily exit that home if either in some way falls apart. And that's a personal assessment you've got to be honest with yourself and make yourself. Over time, regardless of what happens with home values in the intermediate term, over the long term, home values do ride with the general economy, plus a little bit more. So even buying at a time that prices are elevated and interest rates are elevated is not a long-term problem as long as you stay in a home long-term. That's why I put so much emphasis on that. Plus, with the interest rates, inflation still stubborn in the economy. Inflation is significantly lower than it was, but it's still way too high. So the Federal Reserve, doing the manipulation of the money supply they do, has pushed these mortgage rates up indirectly. And ultimately, there will come a time that inflation will be squeezed out and you will have an opportunity to refinance that home into a lower interest rate. That's why time is your friend. The longer the time, the better.
See, that was from 2023. That was Clark Howard 2023, not Clark Howard opining 2 days ago that zero down payment programs were bad for you. He said almost exactly what I said. If you're going to be in a home, I said 5+ years. He said minimum 7. I don't disagree with the number he's saying. I'm saying in Atlanta, you've got a little bit of a curve because home values in Metro Atlanta are outpacing the rest of the country because people are moving here. We keep saying we full, and yet we ain't. We still have people moving here. The metro population continues to grow. We're now a top 10 metropolitan area in the United States. We weren't, just a few years ago. So anyway, when I shared this assessment, I got some pushback from some people that I actually associate with on Facebook, my own personal friends. One of whom, a fellow agent, a very successful agent, by the way, who parlayed his media career to a real estate career. Well-known person in the metro, so it's an easier transition for some than it is. I'd rather take financial advice from someone who has money than someone who has none. Well, first of all, you don't know that I have none, but here's what I would say. Taking financial advice from someone who has money when you are poor means you're taking financial advice from someone who can't relate to you being poor. or being working poor or working class. What does a wealthy person know about not being wealthy? About the struggle of making ends meet, of household budgeting at that cost of living? Nothing. And I didn't really want to sink my teeth into Clark Howard's neck and say, oh, this is white privilege, blah, blah. But there's a little privilege to this. Not everyone has the option to go in with gobs of money to buy a home, and lending institutions are realizing that. My friend Dana, you're right. If I'd waited to save for a down payment, I'd still be renting. Frankly, I think about all the years, 30 plus, she says, I rented because I bought into the, you must have a down payment, minimum 10%, and it pisses me off, she said. I finally bought in 2013 without a down payment, with interest rates under 5%. My one advantage was a terrific credit score. That helps, no doubt about it. That helps. The credit score helps. Today, my mortgage on a 3-bed, 2-bath is a fraction of what I see being charged for rent on a tiny apartment. I'm not saying Clark Howard is completely... In fact, I agree with Clark Howard 2023 and disagree with Clark Howard 2 days ago. And I don't understand, like, first of all, this was just a print article that I read on WSB television. Now, I believe it accompanied a video segment that somebody in WSB's social digital team forgot to clip, to add to it. I don't know. I just know that that sort of jargon without the word can, might, may, being so definitive is bad. And I would tell anyone, and I do this all the time, I would tell anyone in a situation where their credit score is fine, but they're lacking a little bit in the down payment part, listen, I've got lenders who work to do 1% down, 0 down, no PMI. Listen, check it out. It may be for you. As Clark Howard 2023 said, if it's going to mean about the same payment that you're making in rent, why wouldn't you do that? It makes total sense. So yeah, I do disagree with Clark Howard 2 days ago, and I wholly agree with Clark Howard April 2023. I will include both of those in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. I know you came here to listen to me talk politics, and I'm sitting here talking housing, which is, of course, my bread and butter. Nonetheless, I do think that is a political... Housing is, to me, the one political issue that I don't think either party or any of the major candidates running for president are discussing, and I think it's something that obviously it weighs on a lot of folks, as goes the housing industry, goes the economy, right? And we're seeing a very, very sluggish housing market so far in 2024. It's very concerning. Anyway, we will get into the politics part, okay? I promise you, when the Ron Show returns here on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, wherever you podcast. As always, I'll remind you, show notes included at RonShowATL.com every time there is a show, which is normally 5 days a week. But again, thank you for letting me take Tuesday and Wednesday off. Second half of the show, we'll go into some of the primary results. Obviously, we focused a little bit on the Georgia 14 Democratic primary, the winner of that race taking on Marjorie Taylor Greene. Clarence Blaylock joined the show Monday, and he kind of surprised a lot of folks and actually finished ahead in the first primary run back in May 21st. He finished 128 votes ahead of the well-funded, the better-funded, I should say, anyway, candidate who was seeking to take on Marjorie Taylor Greene once winning the primary, and that would be Sean Harris. We had Sean Harris on the show back in November, I want to say, of 2023 when he announced his run. Clarence, I guess I didn't see the brouhaha of him announcing he was running anyway. He too ran and actually had the better ground game for the May 21st primary, finishing 128 votes ahead of Sean Harris, despite being outspent like 10 to, or out fundraised, I should say, 10-1. Well, that didn't work out so well for Clarence on Tuesday. Sean Harris handily winning that race. So we'll dive into that in a little bit, but I thought I'd make this little announcement because I've got about 90 seconds before we stop a break here. I reached out once Chase Oliver, Atlantan Chase Oliver, had become the Libertarian nominee for President of the United States to have him on the show. I mean, why not? He's from here. He is pro-marijuana legalization. He's pro-choice. He is against the Israel-Palestine war. And while he's a libertarian, and there's a lot wrong with that, in my opinion, I cover Atlanta politics. He's from Atlanta. So he actually is going to be on the show Tuesday. He'll be recording this segment with me. So I guess we'll do it on Wednesday. You'll be able to listen to my conversation with Libertarian Party presidential nominee, candidate for president. That'll be my second candidate for president on the show, by the way, in 18 months. Chase Oliver joining the show next Wednesday. So hopefully you'll be able to catch that. And don't worry, it's not like I'm going to roll over for him or anything like that. I'm going to be tough because I kind of think that libertarianism is, or having that thought is a privilege for those. And this is what makes me so curious about him. He, as well, is a gay man, as am I. I understand to some respect marginalization. I would like to think he did too. And yet, I guess my point is libertarianism to me sounds fine. We all would like limited government, except that the marginalization part comes into play. And that's what makes me so curious about Chase Oliver. So we'll have him on Wednesday here on The Ron Show. Looking forward to it.
Call or text The Ron Show anytime at 404-919-2725. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So we talked a little bit about the primary runoff for Georgia 14. Sean Harris, the well-funded Democrat who decided to run. We had him on back in November against Marjorie Taylor Greene. First had to win the primary, and he had trouble doing that. He had to go to a runoff. He had all that money, and yet still he was sort of the Marcus Flowers endorsed, who, by the way, didn't. He ran for office this year himself and didn't win, despite fundraising. Fundraising is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. I work on a couple of campaigns, on the side for some candidates running in South Carolina, and one fundraises pretty well. The other, money helps. Don't get me wrong, but fundraising isn't everything, especially when you're trying to be boots on the ground, and especially when you're trying to take on, a partisan gerrymandered district where you're already facing an uphill battle. Money's not going to always help you win. Marcus Flowers raised a ton of money to try and beat Marjorie Taylor Greene 2 years ago. Didn't happen. Sean Harris, however, did fundraise a good bit. Brought in a lot of money. 10-1 against his major combatant for the nomination to take on Marjorie Taylor Greene as a Democrat in Georgia 14. And still, when the primary rolled around May 21st, he finished 128 votes shy of the person who actually finished first, and that would be Clarence Blaylock, who we had on the show Monday. And as I mentioned to Clarence when we talked on Monday, man, primaries are tough for turnout. Primary runoffs are tougher for turnout. It's going to be all about who gets out the most people. And 11,000 people came out and voted throughout the entire congressional district, 11,000 people. And Clarence came up short. He came up about, less than 4,000 votes shy, if I remember correctly. So Clarence gave it a valiant effort. Sean Harris, and I'm not sure, that you can point to, having more money helps. I don't know. In a primary runoff doesn't really help. Here's what I think helped Sean Harris. I think what helped Sean Harris was that he really was out and about the weekend prior, pressing the flesh at county party events leading up to it in Polk County and Paulding County. Paulding County is a key Democratic stronghold in that district, and he worked the county party machine and showed up at a lot of festivals and events. There were a lot of Juneteenth events. Sean Harris, being an African-American man, obviously that gives him a little bit of, and not that Clarence couldn't also go to a Juneteenth event. Maybe he did. I don't know. Nonetheless, it appears that the lesson was learned after the May 21st results. Get out, press the flesh, see people, meet people. You can't just gloss and spend your way to a victory. And listen, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's just one of those little stub your toe kind of scenarios where you learn from it, you adapt and you learn from it, and you're stronger for having gone through it. It's still an uphill battle for Sean Harris to defeat Marjorie Taylor Greene, but there's, a little less than 5 months to go before November, and there is an unspoken weariness that sets in with conservatives, conservative voters, independent-minded voters who aren't beholden to a party mechanism, and that is the silent majority, if anyone in this country, the independent voter. So maybe he can do it. I don't know. And not unlike Marcus Flowers, he tries to do this from, I think, a more moderate position than liberal as a Democrat. And, hey, we're a big tent party. You're allowed to do that. You may not be in lockstep with Joe Biden 24/7, 365. In fact, that was sort of one of the bone of contentions between Blaylock and Sean Harris in that race, that Harris had been hesitant to endorse Joe Biden. We'll see how that plays out over the next 4.5 months. Listen, when you look at polling and you see down ballot that Senate races, congressional races, that those candidates are running as Democrats are polling better than the president, the top-down thing doesn't really work, right? It may actually be where the bottom drags the top into the to the finish line, to the winner's circle, right? Looking at the rest of some of the results from Tuesday's primary runoff, Lorraine Cochran-Johnson. I met Lorraine last October before Heather Cox Richardson spoke at the Carter Presidential Library. And the first thing that drew my attention to her was that she had a bright smile. She has her, I guess I would call them trademark glasses. She wears, a nice thick black frame with, what would you call it? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, a pentagonal shape. They're sharp. If people have a look, that's a look, That's her look. And it works for her. I just remember her being very engaging. I could not tell you about our conversation. I'm sure it had more to do, because I'm just an egomaniac, right? I'm sure it had more to do with our introducing ourselves to each other. And yeah, I do a podcast. Love to have you on sometime. And we agreed, yeah, let's do that sometime, and just never did. I did reach out to her campaign again and hope to have her on. I even shared a photo to remind her, the handsome bald fellow from October. You remember him, right? He wants you on the show. Anyway, Lorraine Cochran-Johnson ran up against a more heavily endorsed commissioner for the Dekalb CEO position. Commissioner Larry Johnson ran against her in the runoff, and Lorraine Cochran-Johnson, who, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, caught heat for appealing to Dekalb Republicans and was heavily outspent by her rivals in the 2 rounds of voting, still won by double digits, making her the county's first black female CEO. And that's not an unusual thing. We have females at the head in Cobb government, in Gwinnett government, Clayton County government. We'll talk a little bit about that race in a little bit, because that's an interesting one too. And now DeKalb County. Lorraine Cochran-Johnson saying it's a good thing to have endorsements, but endorsements don't win seats. Here's the thing. She says this to supporters after Stacy Abrams and Andre Dickens, mayor of Atlanta, Nikema Williams, my congressperson, and dozens of other Democrats endorsed her opponent, Larry Johnson. Is that a canary in the coal mine? Is that something that makes folks wonder, is our establishment Democrats in trouble going into the November general election season? I've opined that anyone who is pro-Cop City and attaches themselves to a high-profile race could create a negative impact on turnout for grassroots activists going into November. I've been saying that actually for quite a while on this show. I have openly worried and opined that the majority of Atlanta City Council and its mayor, obviously, and some in DeKalb, and some at the state level, supporting the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility could create a problem for Democrats higher up. Andre Dickens famously is a part of the Biden-Harris 2024 reelection campaign. Is that going to be a problem for Biden-Harris in 2024? Is Andre Dickens' endorsement just toxic? Is it bad? Is it poison ivy? Touch it and it's going to give you the itches. Also in the same article, Nikema Williams, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, former gubernatorial nominee Stacy Abrams, and other party elders rallying around a candidate in Clayton County who lost to a former Republican GOP legislator in Rockdale County. From this Atlanta Journal-Constitution article written by Greg Bluestein back yesterday. This came out yesterday. Perhaps the biggest upset involved Janice Van Ness, a former Republican state senator who competed as a Democrat against incumbent Rockdale County Chairman Oz Nesbitt. Again, Representative Nikema Williams, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, former gubernatorial nominee Stacy Abrams, and other party elders rallied around Nesbitt, a former law enforcement officer first elected to the county commission in 2008 and as the county's chief executive in 2016. But Van Ness rode a wave of frustration over Nesbitt's leadership to a roughly 20-point victory amid a campaign that largely steered clear of state and national politics despite the backdrop of one of Georgia's bluest counties. On the trail, Van Ness called herself an independent-minded Democrat who backs Medicaid expansion. Okay, that sounds like a Democrat. And supports lower taxes. Now, careful, I'm not going to say that doesn't sound like a Democrat, because I actually think that Democrats have done a piss poor job messaging. Boy, if that ain't a theme. Like, Democrats aren't against lower taxes. They're against lower taxes, continued lower taxes, the evisceration of the progressive income tax, for example, that calls for wealthier individuals to pay a little bit more because they benefit a lot more from all America has to offer. Frankly, the American public, and again, this is messaging, something Democrats really have to have a conversation, a bigger, more broader conversation. But of course, it's got to be packaged in a way that the average American, with whatever reading level they are at now, or we are at now, understands. The progressive tax system is something that I don't think a lot of Americans understand. Sales taxes and special purpose local option sales tax, SPLOSTs, or what were they called here in Atlanta? Most municipal option. Yeah, most. And their impact on the average American versus all Americans of varying income classes. What else did Van Ness? She said she won't vote for Donald Trump. Okay. Sounds to me like a Democrat, but won't yet endorse Joe Biden either. Honestly, she sounds like a Democrat. I was watching Charlemagne the God was on Bill Maher last weekend, and he essentially said, I'm voting for Joe Biden without saying I'm voting for Joe Biden. Wasn't going to endorse Joe Biden, but vehemently said all that he had to say about Donald Trump, and that, I mean, if you can't put it all together, that's such an interesting situation that's playing out. We see that happening locally here with Janice Van Ness, who's, it sounds to me like she ain't going to vote for Donald Trump. So then who's she going to vote for? Well, you know what? Maybe my guest on Wednesday's show, Chase Oliver, has a chance with Janice Van Ness. I don't know. Besides, she added, party affiliation shouldn't matter as much in a race dominated by parochial issues such as millage rates, zoning policies, and construction projects. I'd rather be in the game, she said, than on the sidelines complaining. Okay, good for her. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution piece, Greg Bluestein, also reporting that in Middle Georgia, an educator, Tangi Herring, defeated John Jackson in the race for a newly created court-ordered majority black legislative district stretching across parts of Monroe and Macon-Bibb counties. Herring, a political newcomer, initially wanted to challenge House Minority Leader James Beverly. Ooh, is he in a world? There is a sexual harassment House caucus thing going on. A lot of Democrats, in fact, a lot of women Democrats in office have sought to have him answer to those allegations. That's a messy one. Anyway, Herring, the political newcomer, initially sought to challenge House Minority Leader James Beverly, but after Republicans drew Herring out of Beverly's district, James Beverly, backed John Jackson, a former local school board president. Herring, meanwhile, drew support from ex-Governor Roy Barnes, several Democratic legislators, and local Macon leaders on her way to a runoff win. I always did the work. I always believed in the people I was serving, she told local TV station WMAZ following her victory over John Jackson. I always believed in why I was doing that. The narrative of this article is essentially that the establishment Democrats had a bad night Tuesday night. And you can see where, in some cases, that there's a little bit of smoke. There could be a little smoldering fire there. Or you could just say, man, primaries are tough. Turnout was low. Primary runoffs, even tougher, even lower. And it's hard to read a whole lot into that. Bluestein apparently reaching out to Talk Radio News 95.5 WSB evening host Shelley Winter for his comment. Why? I mean, we know he's going to make this like a spin statement, and he does. My big takeaway going into November is that Democrats and the machine, especially in Atlanta, need to be concerned about the slipping influence it holds on the electorate. I mean, it ain't like Donald Trump has had much of a track record when it comes to endorsing candidates either. I think he did all right with Brian Jack here locally, but need we mention some of the higher profile races that Donald Trump's effect had no effect on, including the last gubernatorial cycle, including recent Senate races. But yes, Shelley, let's read into not just a low turnout primary, but an even lower turnout primary runoff and conclude that heavyweight Democrats in the state are having this negative impact on down ballot races in these tough turnout cycles. Back after this, The Ron Show, the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, or wherever you podcast. Here we are in the home stretch. Just a few more minutes. And by the way, I've already heard back from Lorraine Cochran-Johnson's staff and her. She emailed me back. She said, of course I remember you. Sweet. She's so sweet. So we're looking at our calendar now to get that on as well. How about that? About to have the next DeKalb County CEO on the show. I got the Libertarian presidential candidate, Chase. And by the way, like within minutes after announcing this, as this segment starts airing on America One Radio today, I got a text from a friend of mine. Why would you have him on? Wait a minute. Why wouldn't I have him on? Again, I'm asking. Like this is not a show that is a runway or a landing strip even for the Democratic Party, Democratic National Convention, the Georgia Democratic Party. What it is a show and a podcast where I have conversations of political importance for Atlanta and Georgia and the United States, and I guess globally as well in some respects when it comes to issues that affect us locally and nationally. But he's I don't say it's a major party presidential, but he's a party presidential candidate, and he's from Atlanta, and he does have some liberal positions. And I'm going to say that, and he's going to be angry. No, I don't know. Maybe now the new Libertarian doesn't care that their positions would be labeled as liberal. It's true. He's pro-marijuana legalization, which I don't even know is a liberal position anymore. It's definitely a libertarian one, apparently. I would say that being pro-choice, obviously Republicans would tell you that that's a liberal position. It's going to be interesting how many votes, and I said this when Chase Oliver won the party nomination. It's going to be interesting to see how many votes he peels off from either side, which side he affects more. When he ran for Senate against Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker, he got more than 80,000 votes in the state. And we all know that, famously, President Joe Biden won the state by just a little more than 11,000 votes over Donald Trump, because Donald Trump literally called the Secretary of State asking him to find the number of votes that he needed to win that race. It was 11,000. Something or other. Listen, if I get pushed back for having Chase Oliver on this show, whatever. I don't care. This is not a rubber stamp of the Democratic Party. I think I have established myself, hopefully, to anyone who listens routinely as being willing to buck the party line, whether it's at the civic level here. I have made my case, I think, quite clearly that I wholeheartedly disagree with the way Mayor Andre Dickens and the majority of City Council has handled the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility. I'm not saying for or against. I would say that there were smarter ways to spend less money to get the same project off the ground without ruffling so many feathers. It politically has just been a dumpster fire of bad PR and optics and tactics used. And I mean, we have 100 and some thousand signatures on petitions, and they're still sitting in boxes in the city municipal clerk's office, and we're not going to have this referendum. And even if we did have it by November on the ballot, well, guess what's going to be for the most part done? The Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility that all those 100,000 plus folks signed on to have stopped. Yeah, so I mean, the pushback I'm already seeing from people about having Chase on my show. Whatever, hear him out. I'm not going to. Am I going to vote for him? No. I said this before. I see libertarianism as something of a white, wealthy privilege kind of thing. Yes, we'd all love limited government. We would all love limited government, except the human element comes in. Greed and power, those in power, having it, and marginalization. I mean, without government, there's a lot of stuff that we'd still be dealing with when it comes to racial marginalization, gender marginalization, sexual preference marginalization, religious marginalization, non-religious marginalization. There's a lot of marginalization that still has to be addressed. And I've argued for a long time that the thing about conservatism that kind of baffles me is it's they're pushing back against efforts to deal with biases and setbacks. They're continuing to sabotage social welfare programs that uplift the poor and the impoverished and the marginalized, that just perpetuate those problems, meaning that money has to continue being spent on them, drawing out the problem and making the government spend more to fix them because you've been sabotaging those efforts all that time, to me is not fiscally conservative. It's actually a huge waste of money, right? I mean, you can have a discussion about more effective ways to deal with situations like the wealth gap or the income gap or the police disparity gap, the judicial outcome gap. There's so many ways to deal with it, but dismissing the other side for even addressing it, wanting to address it, and having no alternative way of dealing with it, but sabotaging the efforts that somebody did come up with, to me, like I said, that's just not fiscally conservative. So, I don't know. I am looking forward to having Chase Oliver. And by the way, he and I would get along on a lot of things. He's from Atlanta. He's also a gay man. He has 2 cats as well. In fact, when I reached out to his campaign, I said, we could do this in my home studio, but I got 2 cats, and they're going to interrupt. And his assistant emails me back and says, oh, no, he would love that. He'd probably love your cats. No, I'm sure he would, but we're not going to do that. We're not going to have Herschel and Dooley waltzing into the middle of a conversation I'm having with a presidential candidate who is the nominee for the Libertarian Party. We're not going to do that. That's just not cool. He also has a dog. I like dogs. It's not one to have a dog in a condo and the smell of the dog and all that. I like other people's dogs. I'll tell y'all what I told my friend who texted me, all concerned that I'm interviewing Chase Oliver. Why are you doing that? Listen, in fact, I'll go ahead and do this. I'm going to email both the Trump and the Biden campaign as well. Those two want to come on my show. You think I'm going to turn them back? Let me tell you something. I would have a blast. Have a blast with Donald Trump. It wouldn't last long. Ask Leslie Stahl. And I would have a blast with Joe Biden as well. So who knows? Maybe I'll do that. I already had Marianne Williamson on. Chase Oliver's next. And who knows? We may have the 2 major party candidates for president on this show at some point in time. All right. That's going to do it for the Ron Show. Show notes and more. I just totally blew this segment just running off about nothing. Sorry. Back tomorrow, 9 to 10 a.m. on the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com. We replay 5 to 6 p.m. as well, and on demand all day at ProgressiveVoices.com. Show notes, RonShowATL.com. Take care.